Welcome back to Economic Outlook. It's been a while since I posted a video message to the blog, but I've gotten my school schedule back under control, so hopefully I can post more video messages in the future. Today we're going to talk about the continuing struggles of General Motors and its prospects for a federal bailout. Now, as we've seen in the wake of the financial crisis in the past year, many firms have received bailouts on Wall Street. Now, General Motors wonders why it can't receive similar treatment from the federal government. We're going to examine how General Motors came to be in this situation, whether or not they have a valid case for receiving a federal bailout, and finally, we'll assess the likelihood that the federal government actually does step in and give GM the money it's requesting. For many people, General Motors is an American institution. Founded in 1930, the company now employs more than 200,000 individuals and is ranked number 9 on the Fortune 500 in terms of global revenue. Generations of Americans have grown up driving GM's familiar brands, including Buick, Cadillac, Chevrolet, Pontiac, GMC, and even Hummer. However, in the first quarter of this year, something remarkable happened. For the first time ever, Toyota surpassed General Motors in terms of global sales. This was yet another milestone in a long downward spiral for GM. This spiral has cost thousands of employees their jobs and erased billions of dollars in shareholder value. On May 13, 2002, a share of GM stock closed for the week, trading at $50.04. Today, that share is only worth $4.36 as the company burns through cash and desperately tries to fend off bankruptcy. Right now, its market capitalization is only $2.46 billion. In little more than a year, the value of GM stock has declined from a high of $41.39 on October 8, 2007 to today's record lows. On the surface, the reasons are obvious. The company lost an astounding $38.7 billion, or $68 per share in 2007, and has continued the trend this year with consecutive losing quarters. The company recently announced its most recent third quarter results, yet another $4.2 billion loss on lower revenues. A survey of analysts expected the loss to be around $3.70 per share, or 3/4 of its current share price, and the actual number was much worse. The company lost an astounding $7.35 per share, almost double the value the share is trading for today. Since 2002, the company's accumulated net losses of over $72 billion, and the results have been devastating, as this chart shows. GM stock has fallen to 11% of its value in January 2002. The value of the S&P 500 has fallen to only 80% of its value in January 2002, despite the recent financial meltdown. Even more shocking than these losses were the company's statements about the cash it has remaining on hand. In the last quarter, GM spent almost $6.9 billion in operations. This has left the company perilously close to running out of the cash it needs to conduct its operations on a daily basis. Now, this is especially surprising considering just a couple of years ago, GM was touting its cash position as one of its few remaining strengths as the company suffered severe losses and accounting issues. Just last year, General Motors used its cash position as a reason why its restructuring efforts were succeeding after accounting irregularities had to be restated and the Delphi bankruptcy took place. Now, this has led some observers to suspect that General Motors will have to file for bankruptcy. However, CEO Rick Wagner, as well as the Chief Operating Officer, have both discounted these rumors and have said the company is committed to cutting costs to remain in business. This includes a suspension of 401k matching, tuition benefits, and an additional 1,900 workers laid off, on top of the 5,100 workers laid off last year. Both internal and external factors have caused GM to be unprofitable and to lack a successful vision for the future. We'll examine both the internal and external causes for GM's woes right now. Let's start with the internal reasons for GM's failure. First, the company has far too many brands and models of cars available on the market. Second, these brands and models are outdated and being surpassed by brands from foreign manufacturers like Toyota and Honda. Third, GM has an extremely expensive employment structure, and finally, General Motors lacks a sufficient organizational strategy to give them the proper vision for designing cars and doing business in the future. Now let's examine each of these factors in a little bit more detail so we can figure out exactly what GM has done wrong internally to cause them to be in the position that they're in today. Many of GM's internal problems stem from the proliferation of brands and models under the GM heading. When GM was a global industry leader, it could afford to have the expense structure associated with so many different brands and models. However, when foreign competitors began to drive prices down, GM was left with an existing expense structure that had a lot of duplication. There were separate manufacturing facilities for each brand, different design teams, and different marketing groups. All of these drove expenses higher at GM, and they were unable to compete on price with foreign competitors. Additionally, as more foreign cars entered the market, consumers were less able to differentiate between the types of GM cars. For example, consumers couldn't tell what Pontiac offered that Chevrolet did not, and vice versa. Eventually, consumers began to jilt all of GM's brands in favor of foreign automobiles. Complicating GM's ability to respond to foreign challengers was its expensive employment structure. The automotive industry in the United States is heavily unionized, and these union contracts often come with heavy healthcare benefits. When GM needed to restructure, it was very difficult for it to reduce workers, and it had to resort to incentives and expensive buyouts. This reduced its flexibility and overall ability to respond to foreign entry.